All right, welcome back. So we're here with the conclusion of New Gods, and this is where everything comes together because we're seeing the fulfillment here of a major prophecy that's involving the new godchild Kamal that we've seen here from the very beginning. And we're also going to understand exactly how this all ties into Darkseid and the absolute universe. So let's dive on in. Also, please forgive me, guys. My voice is still not back to 100% here, so we're going to do our best in this video. So we kick things off here with a flashback to Isaiah's past, the moment where he lost his wife, Avia, who was killed here by Uxas, who we also know here as Darkseid. Now, this here is a turning point that explains why Isaiah became the High Father in the first place, because after Avia's death, Isaiah waged war in vengeance, and he believed that the source had shown him a path forward. But here's the thing. Heman doesn't quite believe that that's the real story, as hinted here in the Prometheus Codex. Because it's mentioned here how it's a fool's errand to attribute motivations to the source's many interventions. To think that we understand what it wants is an act of hubris, the act of a small mind trying to comprehend an impossible truth, like a child trying to capture the sun in their palms. Isaiah believes the source showed him his path, set him upon the course to his destiny. He believes this with the fervency of the faithful, though understandably I am unconvinced, and I have told him as much. I would like to think whatever strength he found to return to us as High Father, whatever dreams that saved them in the desert, they were his own, always. Perhaps it is useful to think of it this way. The light of the source cannot show you where to go. It exists only to help you find yourself in the dark. So when we jump back here into present time, as we remember now that Isaiah and the new gods were forced to fled to Earth because of the Nyctari. Isaiah is currently here singing alone, clearly grieving the loss here of Solus, Lightray. Akala lets him know that thanks to Superman and the Earth's heroes, the new gods have been given a brief respite. Isaiah thanks him and promises to repay that debt someday. Superman responds with genuine care. He's just glad that they're all safe. But Isaiah, he just quietly excuses himself. He can't shake the weight here of everything that has happened. The loss of Lightray and also the loss of his home, their home. But it's here where Mr. Miracle steps in and he drops a perfectly timed observation because he mentions this here to Superman. He's like, they're all hurting. Gods who have been reminded of their mortality. He mentions how they've lost their home, their friends. They need something to hold on to. And by the way, I just love this moment here between Big Barda and Wonder Woman. Phenomenal moment. But Superman responds back by saying, you've been around here long enough to understand, Scott. When the chips are down, sometimes even gods need reminding of the value of little things. Sit down, breathe, count the ones that are still here. Remember the ones who were lost. And it's in this moment here where Scott comes up with this idea. He's like, actually, I think I know just the thing. And he pulls out the mother box and he says, hear me, gods of Sir Twin, fallen but not lost. Hear me and make ground here as I have. If I may so boldly suggest, this place have a name. And then he says the words, new light. And then he continues on. He's like, as is tradition upon breaking new ground, all must heed my call for when he hath, which is translated into the feast of the gods. But then from that moment here, we jump over to where we see Mr. Terrific and Miss Martian, because they've discovered something rather shocking. It wasn't just the new gods who landed on Earth, but it was also Darkseid and the others here from Apocalypse as well. And they trace energy signatures back to an industrial warehouse. And it all leads to one person, Maxwell Lord. Because remember now that they are also after the new godchild as well. But the thing here that was wild to Mr. Terrific here and Miss Martian is that Maxwell wasn't trying to hide his tracks. He wanted the Justice League to find this. The tech that was left behind was deliberately placed there. It was plugged into deep space imaging fields, which we'll get into more of what that means a little bit later on. When Mr. Terrific here and Miss Martian arrive at the site, that is also when the armed enemy showed up. And Terrific, he tells Miss Martian, he's like, listen, grab as much intel as you possibly can while he will buy them some time. And there's this moment here, man, where Mr. Terrific, he starts to go in, and it just reminds me of the recent Superman movie that we just saw. But the reality is here is that Miss Martian, she was the one that completely steals the scene here, because when the attackers here start shooting at her, she hits them with this like full-on nightmare illusion, and she stops them dead right in their tracks. And when Mr. Terrific, like after this is all said and done, when Mr. Terrific asks like, yo, what exactly did you do? She responds back with just pure confidence. And she's just like, I encourage them to question their affinity for firearms. Love it. But what she did find here is that she finds surveillance footage, which most of it, by the way, is deleted, but strategically, like on purpose by Maxwell Lord. Maxwell left just enough for someone to find and making it look simple enough for an imbecile to discover. But that's the misdirection. The real goal here is making sure that no one figures out who else was brought to Earth. So up until this point, they think that Maxwell Lord is behind this whole thing that's here, but they have no idea that anyone else from Apocalypse has also made it here as well. So when we jump back here to the New Gods, we see this feast of the gods going on, right? And that is when we see Seraphin show up. Now remember here, from the previous videos that we've done, Seraphin is working with Maxwell Lord to abduct here this new godchild, Kamal. But nobody suspects him because he was once one of the 5 Earthlings that was chosen here by the High Father to be raised in New Genesis. So he is a new god as well. So when he arrives, they basically just welcome him in like he's family. And I gotta say here, this quick note on Metron, this man cleaned up quite well here because he looks like Mr. Steal Your Girl right here in this moment. But remember here that Metron is essentially kind of orchestrating this whole thing here with the prophecy of the new godchild. He was the one that brought the prophecy to the High Father in the first place. He was the one that woke up Maxwell Lord and set him on this path. But the thing that you realize here towards the very end is that Metron is not doing this in a malicious way. He is doing it so that the prophecy ultimately can be fulfilled in the way that he sees fit. But when we get towards the end of the video, you'll understand exactly what that means. So everyone's here, right? The Justice League, the new gods, like everyone's laughing, they're sharing stories, they're drinking, they're vibing. And then Isaiah just stands up mid-celebration and then he drops this speech. He's like, I wanted to thank you all for your help, your welcome, and this feast. But I have been unable to find the words because my heart is broken. I fought so hard to save a dream, yet I failed to save the children that came of it. I call myself High Father no more. And everyone's like, what? And then he continues on and he's like, and you will choose from among yourselves a new hand to hold the heck up. I will be Isaiah once again. And I gotta say, I love this storytelling here because in the very beginning, they showed us why he became the High Father in the first place. He became the High Father because of loss and then sought vengeance. But here he's suffering loss and instead he's choosing now to renounce himself being High Father. Love the imagery here. But then right here, what happens is that we shift over back to Maxwell Lord and the Apocalypse crew. Now they know that time is running out before people figure out exactly what it is that they're doing. And they need to make their move here for the new godchild. And they need to be surgical about this whole thing. So Darkseid asks Maxwell about the anomaly that he's been referencing, that he's been talking about this entire time. This thing appeared here after Darkseid's death. So everyone thinks that Darkseid is currently dead, but we know that he's out there in the absolute universe. So the anomaly has been growing. It's a gravitational singularity here, so powerful that nothing escapes it. So Darkseid, he just thinks that it's just a black hole, but Maxwell corrects him. He's like, this isn't just any black hole. This one here is special. And he mentions, he's like, all the black holes that we know of pull in matter, light, and also space, and give away very little. Traces of radiation, bits of information. But this one, it's been throwing up all kinds of information. Part of my little project staring out into the void beyond has been to discern what this information means. So when Darkseid is like, and like, what did you get? Maxwell's like, I think it is an echo of a reality beyond our own. Keep going. A strange, skewed mirror that was formed with Darkseid's death. What if he never died, Desaad? What if he is yet looking through the glass at us? What if he is his mere presence expressing a gravity so vast that it eats space and swallows light? What if he is, and as he reveals here, while he's saying this, like he's revealing the symbol here that Metron put on his forehead, but also at the same time, that's what I thought initially, but now I'm like, no, that's like Darkseid symbol. I'm like, crap, that is the Omega symbol. But that's here when Granny Goodness, she like chimes in with her own sort of like ominous perspective. She's like, the meddler's prophecy, and she's talking here about Metron's prophecy, the storied child. If he is to be the reflection that Darkseid seeks upon the side of the cosmic mirror, then we must bring this child to him. To which Maxwell's like, because he's recognizing the reality here about the new gods in the Justice League, he's like, there are more of them than us. And when we take the boy, they will all come for him. Our window will close fast, which is when Granny Goodness is like, you and Desaad and your traitor must make sure you do your part. The Furies, as in the female Furies, Granny Goodness is the female Furies here, and the good old goodness will hold the rest of them back. But then we shift gears here because what everybody keeps on forgetting is that the Niktari, they're still on the search right now for the new gods since they escaped. And Karak and his people here, alongside Graven, they're out there and they're pursuing and they're trying to find out exactly where they went. But then later on, what we find out here is that John Stewart, while he was monitoring things there on Earth, he received a signal from another Green Lantern that was scoping out the area that was left behind. And they spotted something, that the Niktari, they have now tracked where the new gods are. And they also as well know that the new god child, the prophesied child, is also on Earth. And they are now sending out a scouting crew. What also happens here with Isaiah now stepping back as the High Father, the mantle here has been passed down to Orion. And as part here of this ritual, Orion must choose a new name. So what he does here is that he chooses a name, the Oathmaker. And while Orion accepts the mantle, there's one thing that he refuses. He will not take the name the High Father or his father's staff. He wants to hear directly from Isaiah that he is ready to be able to do something like that, and not just by default. But as Oathmaker, Orion makes a very powerful promise here. He's like, I will lead them in war and destiny. I will take them back home to New Genesis. I will stand upon the Devourers rebuilt once more to look from the floating cities to win, to remember the hope that was granted to the gods in their darkest hour. But as mentioned before here, John Stewart's sort of like earlier message takes on a whole new urgency because the Niktari have now located the child here on Earth, and they are now sending out their forces to come after him. So Orion sees this as an opportunity. He wants to use this moment here to fight back, and he has a new weapon in mind, and that weapon, he's like, we might as well use Kamal to fight them back because he sees what the child, or he's seen what the child has been able to do. But Scott Free here is pushing back. He's like, dude, he's just a child. And Orion, with of course the history here as a war dog, he responds kind of coldly. He's like, yeah, and so was I, and so were you, Scott. The kid will do what is needed of him. And this right here is exactly the moment that Seraphim was waiting for. Because earlier, the Seraphim had spoken to Kamal, telling him the truth about gods. And he mentioned this to him. He was like, when it comes to the gods, you would think that they are about honor and wisdom. But the truth is that a child like Kamal is nothing to them, just a new toy, an instrument until you can show them otherwise. So while Orion and Scott were here talking, Kamal heard exactly what they were saying. And from his perspective, exactly what Seraphim said rings true. So when Scott Free tries to stand between his brother and what Orion thinks needs to be done here, because Scott is trying to protect the child, because Scott made a promise here to Kamal that he would protect him. Kamal here, he's like, no, I heard what you guys were saying, and he feels betrayed. So what he does is that he just takes off and he starts running, and then he runs right into Seraphim's arms. Now Seraphim, what he does here is that he loads up one of his special bullets, and then bang, Kamal, he shrinks down, and then Seraphim takes him directly here to Maxwell Lord and that new Apocalypse Alliance. And what happens here is that when Kamal returns back to normal size, he's greeted by a creepy Maxwell Lord, who, by the way, decided to claim that he's great with kids. But when Seraphim kind of asks a question, he's like, hey, man, I'm not really sure how our young friend is going to feel about what you're trying to get done now. And we've already seen what Kamal is capable of whenever he gets nervous. So Maxwell's like, nah, don't worry about it. Just leave that to me. But then Maxwell Lord here uses his powers of mind control as he says this. He's like, now, young man, calm down and listen to my voice. Everything is going to be all right. So now here's the thing, right? After delivering Kamal, Seraphim kind of has a little bit of a bone here to pick with Maxwell Lord, who, by the way, is dealing with a nasty nosebleed at the moment. So what Seraphim's bone to pick here is that he's not happy about how Maxwell is working with the Apocalypse crew, and he confronts him about it. So Maxwell fires back. He's like, bro, you knew what this was all about before you joined on in, and then you played along because you thought that it would make you relevant, which is just a low blow, my guy. So of course, naturally, Seraphim doesn't like that he said that. And then he kind of like points his finger towards him and is like, you better watch it, Maxwell Lord. And then he points his index finger at him like he's about to shoot him. But then this dude's finger just breaks like out of nowhere. And the reason why that happened is because the Sod, well, homeboy's watching Maxwell Lord's back here, and he comes out of the cut and then looks at Seraphim and is like, I, for one, think that you, Seraphim, have been incredibly useful, and I can think of just one last thing that I'd have you do. So when we jump over here back to the New Gods establishment, remember now that Scott Free had called this place the New Light. We see here where Mr. Terrific confirms the news that everyone already knew, that Kamal has been taken, and then also Seraphim is missing. So Orion wants to bring Kamal back at all costs, but Mr. Terrific thinks that would be a spectacular mistake because he mentions, he's like, think about it, Orion. Not a moment has passed since you all arrived and you want to tear up the place looking for this kid? Because remember, after all, now when the New Gods first showed up to Earth, the DEO showed up and was like, yo, what's going on here? So Mr. Terrific was just like, bro, I don't want this type of drama. But to Orion, he's like, bro, do you think I care how things look? To which Mr. Terrific is like, yeah, I know that you don't. So Big Barter is like, Oathmaker, you should though. So when Orion goes to make a move, Scott stands in his way and is like, think about this for a second, Orion. I know you'll always be the dog of war at heart. It's part of who you are, but they look to you now and they'll follow you to any end. We all lost a lot to get here, and to find a place of relative safety, a lot of people put themselves on the line to give us that. If you are truly to lead us, you can't just throw all that away looking for a fight. And that's what calms Orion down, because he's like, all right, fine. So what do you recommend? And that's what Mr. Terrific says. He's like, precision. A select few of you will work alongside some of us from the Justice League. Your battles, but our turf, will be quick and incisive. Retrieve the child, neutralize the threat. So when Big Barter asks a question, she's like, do we even know where to begin and what we're up against? To which Diana responds back and it's like, it's Maxwell Lord. And Miss Martian, she pops in and she's like, and we have reason to believe that he's working with others who's escaped the Nectari invasion. We believe that they came here using the new Genesian ship as cover. And she continues on by mentioning that they've been digging into Lord's holdings ever since that they had a sense of his involvement. And they've kept tabs on energy use at installations with links to him. They've cross-referenced those with Oberon's input on source energy signatures, and they think they know exactly where they are and where they're holding the boy. So when they reach this location, it's an abandoned place. And Terrific, he's currently picking up here on some spiking energy readings. And in seconds, they are under attack. And then out from the shadows, what we see here is the female Furies. And then we see Granny Goodness herself. And what happens here in this moment is that Mr. Terrific, he sees some other energy signatures that are also spiking. and there's a ship that is taking off. So Scott and Orion, they exchange a glance real quick and they're like, you see what I'm seeing? You know what I'm saying? So they move to intercept. But Granny, she got other plans because she sends out Stompa after Scott. So the punch was about to land on Scott, but instead, Big Barda, she steps right in and then she blocks it. So then Big Barda, she looks at Scott and she's like, yo, y'all better go. We got this. But Orion, he hesitates here for just a second until Scott puts his hand on his shoulder and is like, my guy, like, trust me, she got this. So as they're getting ready to get on up out of there, Diana mentioned, she's like, oh no, they got a force field up. And this made me laugh here because Scott was just like, no, as he phases through it, problem. That was kind of cold, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. I love it. And then Orion, this dude's just mad aggressive, right? Because he pulls out this little staff here, and then that thing transforms into a light cycle. My bad, y'all. Wrong franchise there. So what that does here is that leaves Barda, Wonder Woman, and Akala to hold the line on the ground here. And honestly, for a while, they're kind of handling their business a little bit, but then the tide starts to turn drastically. Now back here on the ship, Maxwell and his crew, like he's making his final play here, right? And he's bringing Kamal closer to his true destiny, as he says it, whatever that means, right? But the thing is that Darkseid is not liking how he's hesitating a little bit too much, which was when Maxwell's like, nah, man, check this out for a second. He's like, you gods ever hear of Icarus? It's supposed to be a cautionary tale about ambition. Icarus flew too close to the sun, but really it's a story about control, to keep people from reaching for the stars, to keep God-fearing men from reaching out and touching the gods. And Darkseid's like, listen, I just hope that you're not having second thoughts, man, because I'd have to kill you, bro. To which Maxwell's like, nah, my guy, I'm just savoring the moment. But remember now, Scott and Orion, they're currently in hot pursuit. So Orion mentions to Terrific that Maxwell used the boom tube to escape. So Mr. Terrific, he relays some information here about what that means for their next move. He mentions that he's way ahead of them, and that Miss Martian and him found deep space mapping data at one of Lord's sites. And they were looking at something there, something that looks like one of the largest black holes that they've ever encountered, but it doesn't act like any that they know, that they think that's where they're headed. And he's gonna send them the data to their mother boxes right now. So as Scott and Orion, they continue on their pursuit, you know, they start getting this little like pep talk. I'm kidding, it's not really a pep talk. It's really just a conversation between both of them here. So Orion is just like, yo, Scott, when we find the boy, I'll do what it takes. You bring him back to his family and to the new light. He trusts you. To which Scott's like, we'll get him back, Orion. I know that we will. And as Orion says, whatever it takes, he says, we cannot lose hope, not twice. Now, when we jump back here to the new light base, we see Hal, we see Miss Martian, and John and Joe are there too as well. And they're having some conversation. And Hal mentions something that sends chills down their spine, or down his spine at least. They start talking about the black hole and how he's never seen it spit out, or seen any sort of black hole here spit out that much amount of radiation. But Miss Martian mentioned, she's like, there's a theory, and it's just a theory, that mirror universes lie on the other side of a black hole. Of course, no one can prove this because no one would survive going through the singularity at the heart of one. But she does wonder though, just what is powerful enough to radiate across universes. And we already know what or who that is, right? That's Darkseid. But then Hal says this, he's like, you know, as long as whatever it is that stays on its side, I say leave it be. We've got our fair share of bad news right here. And just when he says that, this alarm starts going off. But it wasn't the black hole. Because remember, John Stewart has been monitoring and he's been receiving communication here of the Nyctari coming to Earth. And the Nyctari just made their way into the atmosphere. So what happens here and who we pick up on next is the Black Racer. Because remember, the last time that we saw him here, he was helping to bring Solus, aka Light Ray, back here from the afterlife. Now, we don't see what happens to Light Ray here. I'm assuming that that's going to be picked up on, I guess, another series or another sort of like time when they do New Gods again. But we do know that he is coming back, right? They left that cliffhanger there. So since then, the Black Racer has been quiet. He's been living sort of a quiet life here on Earth as a regular person. But then he sees what's happening here in the sky. The Nyctari, that they're currently on their way and that they've actually arrived now in space to retrieve the new gods here from Genesis. So what happens here is that the Black Racer, he springs back into action here because it's time to be the racer again. Now, meanwhile, we shift back gears here to the battle that was happening on the ground between Wonder Woman, Big Barda, and Akala. And they're still locked in right now with Granny's crew. And they're holding their own, but let's just put it this way. It's kind of like barely they're holding their ground. Akala creates these exit gateways here to counter Mad Harriet's attacks. But Mad Harriet throws one of her spikes through the gateway, and really it's kind of like a distraction because when Akala moves in to strangle her, it's not Harriet that he's actually strangling, it's an illusion, and Akala is actually strangling Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman is like, Akala, what are you doing? And Mad Harriet's just licking her daggers, looking all mad. So then right here, what happens is that Big Barda ends up knocking down Stampa, but then takes a brutal beating from kind of Granny Goodness herself here. And here's why. Like, Granny is kind of a problem here because Darkseid specifically chose her to train the female Furies because she can see weakness in every single fighter. So right now, Granny and her Furies has everyone on the back foot. So then what happens next here is that we cut back here to the black hole where Dezzy tells Maxwell it's time to take the boy here to his destiny. Now, meanwhile, he's like, I got Scott and I got Orion. I'll deal with them. So both Scott and Orion, they work out a plan here where Orion will go after Kamal, but Scott feels something different calling to him. Now, at this point, they've lost comms here because of the singularity, the interference with the singularity here. So they've lost comms. So what Scott mentions here, he's like, do you feel it, Orion? Whatever is on the other side of that black hole, it's a familiar pull somehow. You were right, you know, about this kid, about me, about most of everything, Orion. I have to save Kamal. And that's when Orion is like, no, Scott, we have to save him. So here they strike a plan again. So Orion is like, when we get closer, they will no doubt intercept. Let's give them what they want. I will go after Kamal. You neutralize whoever is on that ship, and then you join me after. So when Scott, he ascends down, he goes face to face here with Dezzy. And what happens in this moment here is shocking. Well, it's at least shocking to me because Dezzy decides to reveal what he actually looks like. And before he does that, he mentions this. He's like, I put on whatever face is asked of me. And in this moment, whether you see it or not, I am a savior. And then he says, Darkseid is, and then continues on by saying, and I will be the one to usher in this inevitability. Before I do this, I will allow you to look upon my true face before I kill you. And like I said, I just did not expect him to look like this whatsoever, right? Like, did you guys? You let me know. And it's in this moment here where Dezzy just starts unleashing everything on Scott. And while he's doing this, he says, he's like, you know, Scott Free, I designed this wondrous instrument specifically with you in mind. It uses my Inquisitor's mirror to reflect my pain to my enemy, amplified 1,000 times. I love pain. It gives me immense pleasure. And I'm like, what in the kink is going on here? But let's continue. He's like, I could stay in here for all eternity, but tell me, Mr. Miracle, how does one escape a trap that does not seek to bind you? So then we shift over here where we see Maxwell is now taking Kamal directly to the black hole. So Orion is charging and he's going in hard. But here's what happened is that Bernadette, she steps in for a little bit. Now, Bernadette is also a member here of the female Furies, and she tries to slow him down. But listen, Orion was like, you better get on up out of here, and makes quick work of her and just keeps on moving. Go ahead, Orion, with you in that light cycle. So then after Orion gets past her, Maxwell Lord starts talking. He's like, ha ha ha, look at you, a ball of power and rage, barely contained in your own body, a true cosmic force, and yet only a fraction of the power waiting to be unlocked in this little child. To which Orion's like, why are you doing this, Lord? Like, what's this all about? To which Maxwell responds back and it's like, what other choice do we have left? Human beings, I mean. My concern has always been to safeguard our interests. Do you understand? Forever under attack by increasingly powerful things. First, Darkseid, now the gods, then the devils, superheroes, supervillains. We've been told to forever cower in the shadow of greater beings. I was woken and pulled into this conflict by a god. You understand? Like a pawn. But this child, he was made to protect us, and he can be molded not as a god or an alien, but one of us. Don't you see? But then Orion is like, the power that lies beyond that singularity, once it takes him, you'll never control it. Trust me, I know. And that's when Maxwell goes back to this Icarus thing again. He's like, Icarus, oh Icarus, beware the sun. Yes, I know. I think I will take my chances. To which Orion is like, then I will stop you. And Maxwell is like, oh, I have looked inside this boy, Orion. Would you like a real taste of what lies within? And then he just says, go on, Kamal, break him. And Kamal just like dashes here after Orion, and he starts to break the armor that's on him. And as Kamal unleashes this light, Orion, he fights back, he snatches his hand forward, and then he says these words. As you can see that he's in agony and pain, he's like, I will not be broken so easily. So when we go back down here on the ground, what we do see is that Wonder Woman was able to snap a collar out of the trickery and back here to reality by using, of course, the lasso. But then what really changes the tides here is that Big Barda, she gets big. And that is ultimately here what turns the entire match in their favor, because with that, she lays out the rest of the Furies, leaving Granny Goodness by herself. But remember now, we do have the Nyctari, who just lit it out in space. So the Green Lanterns, they're supposed to be the only ones that can defend against them right now. And you can see that they're largely outnumbered. Now, if you ask me, I personally think that the Green Lanterns can take them all by themselves if they really wanted to. However, this is a new God story, so therefore, for plot reasons, they won't. Because what happens here is in seconds, the Nyctari, the ships, they start to explode. And everyone's looking around like, yo, what's causing this? What's going on right now? And what we see here next is that it's the Black Razor. And then Kilowog says, he's like, well, I guess that's the firepower that we needed. Or that's the firepower that we're looking for. Same thing. So then we come down here to the final confrontation, because we are back here at the singularity at the edge of space. And Kamal is so strong, right? Because Orion, this man is fighting him with his shirt off. No, I'm kidding. No, but in reality, though, you can see how powerful Kamal actually is, because he's bringing Orion here kind of to the edge. Now, to be fair, you could probably say that like Orion is probably holding back a little bit because he doesn't really want to actually kill the child. But still, like Kamal is pushing him. And for a second here, like the dog of war is about to come out in Orion, but then he stops and he pauses for a second. And he remembers that moment that he had here with Kamal, where Kamal walked over to him after they had just landed here on Earth, after just losing Light Ray and everything, or at least hearing from his father that Light Ray was dead. Kamal had come up to him and said, are you okay? And that's what Orion pulls from here as he talks to Kamal. And he's like, you don't have to do this. Do you hear me, Kamal? You don't have to. But Kamal, even though he had paused for a moment, he just blasts right through Orion's chest. And then dude just like flies off. But what we see next here is, because remember now, Darkseid was giving Scott the business, right? Darkseid is overwhelming him. And then we see Darkseid continuing to taunt Scott. He's like, there is nothing that you can do to stop this. You lack the strength to crack the shell. This is why you were so driven to slip your binding scot-free. You are weak. How much longer do you think that you can hold out? But then Scott, he pulls from that inner strength and he's like, Darkseid, you think that you know pain? My own father traded me away as a baby for some notion of borrowed peace. I am like you, a god, but not a day goes by without worrying if I'll be a good enough father to my child. And I'm such a coward that I can't even ask the woman that I love for help, for fear that I wouldn't be living up to her idea of me. And you think that you know pain? I'll let you in on a trade secret. All the times I've escaped your endless traps on Apocalypse, my power, it is to exist in both states of the binary choice, both within and without. The moment there is a box, I can choose in or out. It's that simple. But pain, I've learned a thing or two about pain in my time on Earth. Pain is not a box. It looks like a box. It feels like a box, but it is in fact a state of existence. And it's in that moment here where Scott begins to turn the tides against Desaad. He's like, isn't it beautiful, Desaad? What power can a god have over a people who walk and live and love and exist every day within their pains? There is no escape, only embrace. And when you do embrace it, the box has no choice but to fall apart. And now you'll forgive me for rearranging that gorgeous jawline. And then right after this moment here, we see this narration. Now this narration here, just to let you know where this is coming from, this is Metron, and this pretty much basically carries us to the very end of the story here. And it starts off by saying, it was that moment when it all came together. A million butterflies set adrift, the beating of their wings spurring storms of destiny and fate. As we see Big Barda finish off the rest of the female Furies. And as we see Kamal ascending directly here into the black hole, the narration continues by saying, as the child, driven by Maxwell Lord's ambition, drifted ever deeper into the dark, the gods everywhere had begun to realize what lay on the other side of the black portal. And it's here where we see Big Barda's mother box starting to go crazy. And when Diana asks a question, she's like, what's it saying? Big Barda mentions, she's afraid, Diana. We must head up there. We do get this moment here where Akala asks Seraphim the question, as of course he was trapped and held here by Maxwell and the people from the Apocalypse. Akala wanted to know, like, the reason why you did this, was it because you wanted to, or were you coerced? To which Seraphim mentions, nah, I wasn't. Even here, after all that has happened, you can't bring yourself to consider it. It was me, you thick oaf. It was me all along. I did it. I took the boy. I brought him here. A new god. The new gods of Forever Town. It's what I was told all my interminable life. For what? To sit on the sidelines and keep them safe while they waste all their gifts and turn all that is good to gravel and grit? And gods sit around shaking their heads, building their havens, musing about the peace and persistence. Maybe I wasn't ever meant to be one of you, Akala. Maybe I belong down here where I came from. And we see here where Metron's narration continues. A million gambles pay off. Consequences even I haven't begun to understand bear fruit as brothers meet once again at the edge of doom. And as Scott here comes to check on Orion, you can see the pain in Orion's voice as he says, I tried, Scott. I tried to save him and failed. And Scott makes a joke. He's like, at least he didn't blast you through the heart. To which Orion responds back and is like, I'm not sure the gods have a heart, Scott Free. But Scott, ever so positive, right? He's like, I know that they do. We have to try, Orion. And as Scott grabs Orion's hand, he's like, I have to bring him back. To which Orion is like, but it is Darkseid who stirs beyond the veil. In my state, I don't think, or I don't know if I can. But Scott's like, nah, I got it. You make sure that Lord and Desaad answer for what they've done. I'll bring Kamal back. I made him a promise, Orion. Besides, it's only Darkseid. I've known how to escape him all my life. But then here, Metron's narration continues as it says, how the mortals love musing about free will. But free will is only the near edge of a grand pattern you will never be able to see. Scott Free, for all his flaws, makes the inevitable choice. Whatever echo of an intelligence that pervades within the singularity finally takes notice of the prophesied child within, a focus of power that is within its grasp. The child will be bestowed with gifts, 8 opulences from beings of untold power. All of existence teeters upon the edge. What dark portents await should the child's first gift come from Darkseid himself? As the child sinks deeper into the singularity, Maxwell Lord's grip on his mind is inevitably lost. All that's left is an innocent boy whose thoughts are of his parents, of the friends he ran away from, of regrets that no child should ever have to contend with. Then a familiar, reassuring grip curls around his fingers. A voice, kind and fearless, wraps itself around his mind. And it's with this here where Scott Free fulfills the promise that he made to the child. As he mentions, "It's Mr. Miracle, and I am here to keep you safe." And as the narration continues and says that in the moments before the singularity winks out of existence, Darkseid knows this familiar voice. And in his grand cosmic slumber, of course he's talking here about Mr. Miracle, he allows himself a smile. He is proud, even if grudgingly, of what that boy has become. But then meanwhile, far above mortal skies, death itself, as in the Black Wraithser, contends with annihilation, a stalemate of ideas awaiting a telling blow. So it comes down to this: why it was Lord that I picked, which is how you know, like I said, that this is Metron, why I brought the gods to Earth, why I had Lord tip off the Justice League. The child is unsure. He will fight or he will hide in safety, an answer even I could not foretell. And as the child here talks to Diana, Diana mentions to him, they need a hero, a savior, but you shouldn't have to be any of those things. That's the whole point, isn't it? If you choose to walk away, we will find another way. We always have. You don't have to carry that. Then the boy says, but how do I know the right thing to do? And that's when Diana says, you already know deep down. But when I find myself lost, sometimes I use this, the lasso of truth, to remind myself of what I already know. And it's here where Metron mentions, and so it unfolds as it was told, the power from the lasso brings on a change. The steed of prophecy is thus given his first opulence by another child of the gods. And with that, he shows the Nyctary the true opposite of annihilation, the source in perhaps its purest form. And as we see here Kamal in his true form, his true power, the narration says, unlike the Alpha Force, the source does not seek to create, destroy, or to remake. It is not concerned with matter at all, only potential, not what you are, but all the things that you could be. The Nyctary are engulfed in an emptiness, not black, but white, a searing blank page, brimming with the possibilities of an unwritten future. As the last remaining Nyctary scout is caught in this light, the darkness is stripped from his body. Every scar, every knot of muscle, bone, tissue, and blood is stripped down to its constituents, molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, precursors of matter, and then only vibrations of energy. In his final moment, every mote of his being remembers a time before the darkness, a memory, a thrumming with the innocence of pre-creation. They know this light is not a fall to despair, but a return to innocence. And as we fast forward here in time, what we see in the aftermath is Orion saying these words to Metron. He's like, so you knew it would all come to this? To which Metron responds back and is like, I knew that your path was a different one, yes. And it's here where we see Orion performing a ritual that would now make Scott Free the High Father, because he mentions here how he hesitated and that he was afraid, and that when it came to diving into the void after the boy, that he couldn't. So therefore, the Heka should be held by the hands that know kindness, but also does not know fear. Scott dove in where he would not tread. I say this as someone you all chose to follow. I think Scott Free should be your High Father. And as he hands the staff here over to Scott Free, we hear Metron saying, for what it was worth, I do not think you made a poor choice. And as Orion makes up here with the High Father, and as the High Father, the previous High Father, I should say at least, Isaiah, apologizes to Orion. And as they hug it out, and when he walks away, he tells Isaiah, he's like, I've left Scott with a heavy burden, and he could use your wisdom. We see here where Orion, he walks over to Metron, and Metron is like, You know what you must do next then. To which Orion is like, he is alive yet, isn't he? Darkseid. To which Metron says, in a manner, yes he is. He tried across entire realities to reach out and lay his hands upon the boy. To which Orion is like, okay, well, he must be stopped. It is my destiny. And Metron reaches his hands out and says, then come, and I will show you other possibilities. All right, so personally, what do you guys think here? I just absolutely loved Ram V's writing here for this series. Top notch, top tier. What makes it brilliant is how each character's journey is depicted here. Orion, known as the War Dog, is forced to acknowledge his vulnerabilities. Scot-free becomes the one who breaks free from his fear and then ultimately makes the ultimate play. And he can do that here because of his growth from fatherhood. He knows the sadness of his relationship with his own father, and he uses that pain here as his greatest strength. Then there's a connection between Big Barda and Wonder Woman. Their dynamic throughout the issue, or throughout the series, I should say, here is phenomenal. There's so much more to unpack that I could talk about here. What was your favorite thing? Just let me know. And if you haven't kept up here with this series, if you feel a little bit lost, check out the playlist down below here, where I kind of bring everything together. It would help to kind of fill in some gaps. Don't forget to leave a like here on this video as well, which really helps to push this video to a wider audience. Subscribe if you're brand new to the channel, and that's also a way for you to be able to stay connected. Join our Discord. The link for that is going to be down below in the description. And as always, thank you so much for kicking it with Keeping It Comic. Bye.